Hello, and welcome to the first episode of You Would Think, a podcast devoted to confronting our own thoughts and feelings so we can face reality as it is instead of continuing to be disappointed in how we wish it was. My name is Josh Simkowski, and I'll be your host for this journey to self reflection and radical acceptance. I'm a simple guy that loves to help people find Jesus and change their lives through a Christ centered biblical recovery process. The subtitle, Misplaced Expectations Lead to Big Time Disappointments, is a quote and homage to my dad. This is what he told me when I got sober from drugs and alcohol as I faced the often frustrating, confusing, and exhausting steps of recovering my life. Because here's the honest truth about getting sober. It doesn't really solve any problems. In fact, when I finally made the decision and did something about it, my life became much worse. Or at least that's what I thought, because I hadn't learned that just because I think or feel something doesn't make it true. Ouch. The truth was that getting sober abruptly, and whether I liked it or not, brought all of the consequences: the relational, the personal, the emotional, the financial, the vocational, the spiritual. You fill in the blank. All of the consequences, results, and repercussions of my past behavior came screaming into the light of the present moment. And what did I expect would happen? What makes anyone think that just because they get sober, that means their lives are all of a sudden supposed to be magically better? You can see how the principle of misplaced expectations is already starting to unfold. What I've learned over the past 6 years of my own recovery research, experience, observations, working with other guys on their 12 steps, leading a recovery group, and probably most importantly, or maybe the most enlightening thing, is being a single father of two daughters, is that disappointments related to misplaced expectations are everywhere. And more often than not, the culprit of my own way of thinking. So for this first episode, I want to keep it super simple and just ask a question. Can you think of any time recently that you've said to yourself, you would think, ... and then fill in the blank? I actually just caught myself doing this right now as I'm writing this script. I can hear my daughter in her room talking to her friend on the phone, and she's trying to sing a whole song in one breath at the top of her lungs. Well, you would think that she could tell that I'm trying to write and focus. Man, the whole house can hear her, and how can you listen to yourself be that loud for that long? I know this is kind of funny. Anybody who knows my daughter knows that I'm being funny and that she's awesome. And while this does seem like a silly example, it's also a reminder of how often and true it is that I willingly project the responsibility of my own thoughts and expectations onto other people when they don't even know it most of the time. So what does that look like for you? How often and how many examples can you recall just in the last 24 hours that you've done this? Here are some examples of what this sounds like. We've been married for 20 years. You would think they would, ... I've been working overtime every weekend for the past 6 months. You would think my boss would, ... I can't believe they said that about me. You would think that someone that's known me for that long would, ... They're late again. You would think by now, ... I'm just trying to get groceries. You would think my kids could, ... You can see how many different areas of our lives that this gets into, that we get into this mindset and we get so frustrated and we get so disappointed. And then when we really look at the situation, it's like, well, what did we expect would happen? Right? All these examples. It's like, well, these are just the things that's always happened or that should happen. But yet we have these projected expectations in our heads that really don't make any sense. I say it like that, but a lot of times they really don't make any sense. They just are what we just wish things would be like. So how many times have you been disappointed in other people, places, and institutions? What kinds of expectations did you have? Were they misplaced? How so and why? Because here's the thing. Sometimes we can have absolutely expected and well-placed expectations. That's honestly how I think really balanced and good relationships are built, on mutually agreed upon expectations. But how many of those do we really have? So what I mean by this is, do my expectations meet the reality of the patterns that have been shown to me? Chances are they don't. And the more specific and honest we can get about answering this question, the more we can become better communicators and the more healthy we can become, which in turn, when we become more healthy, then our relationships become healthy. And if we're in relationships with people that aren't very healthy, the more healthy we become, the more apparent it becomes that maybe we need to have some healthy boundaries in those areas. That will be an episode for the future about boundaries and expectations, which I'm really looking forward to. But right now, we're going to get back on track. So I hope this sparks someone listening to take an inventory of their own misplaced expectations so they can start the process of taking responsibility for their own thoughts, feelings, and actions. Because that's what we're about here at this podcast. We're about facing reality and taking responsibility. If there is a place to leave a comment, I would love to hear y'all's real life examples, encouragements, questions, feedback, anything you'd like to say. But mainly, I'd love to see you fill in the blank with you would think ... and then give me your examples. Obviously, you don't want to use personal people or real life in this, but you can be as specific as you want to be. Let's say that, because I'd love to read these examples and learn more about how this principle rings true in everybody's lives. So if you've enjoyed this content and want to hear more, please like, subscribe, click on all the stuff. You guys know how to do all that. This obviously isn't the first podcast you've ever heard. And honestly, do we really even need another podcast? Maybe. But it's been happening for so long, and I've ran into this so frequently that I was just with my 12-step guys this morning, and it just came out like, man, every single thing that we've been talking about all morning has to do with our own misplaced expectations onto other people. So why don't we open this dialogue up to the greater public? Why don't we get some people thinking about this? Why don't we develop a community of people that really care about the reality that they live in and that they want to show change? They want to do something different with their lives. They don't want to keep going down the same patterns that create the same results. And then they get disappointed that the same results happen. And it's so frustrating and so common. So I hope this has been helpful to you, and I look forward to seeing your comments, engaging with you, getting some feedback, and I'll look forward to the next episode. So until next time, always remember that just because you have a thought or feeling doesn't make it true. God bless.